Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology turned podcast. Everyone, welcome in the program. I hope that you're doing well and you are ready for today's show, because you may have guessed it. Today on the program, we have the one, the only Mr. Ralph Bond. He'll be joining us here to talk, well, all things science and technology. That is his title, Science and Technology Trends correspondent. And these are stories that you may not have heard about. They're very technology focused, very science focused, and all over just things that might even affect your everyday life. Some of the stories that I can already tell you that Ralph and I have talked about years before they started to kind of leak out. Everything from advanced prosthesis to we did a story about turning roadways into solar panels, and we're seeing that start roll out. Just stuff like that. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll get it more into exactly what it is with Ralph, but suffice to say, you want to hear this. And hey, you want to hear this on a Friday because it's been a long week as always, and let's go ahead and make it a little more fun here at the end. So with that being said, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything, including the show notes. Ralph does a fantastic job of putting together the show notes so that if you want to know more, if you want to find out more, see the picture, see the video that we're going to be showing on the video portion of the show, but you're simply listening on podcast, computeramerica.com, today's show notes, and you will be able to find that right there, because by the time that you're hearing this, the show notes will be posted. Ralph, of course, provides these beforehand, and we appreciate that as well. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and bring Ralph on and get started. And once again, science and technology trends correspondent, longtime Computer America friend, and all-around great guy, Ralph. Welcome back onto Computer America. How you been?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be back. And again, if you're new to the show, if this is the first time you've watched or listened to us, let me set the stage for you. What Ben and I do each Friday is highlight 4 recent articles that show us key trends and developments in everything. Artificial intelligence, robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, agricultural technology, construction technology, space research, physics, on and on, you name it. But here's the deal, and Ben kind of alluded to this. Most important of all, we're going to give you an oasis of positive news thanks to the world of science and technology.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Although I will say that just recently, Ralph, by the time people are hearing this, about a week ago, they gave, OpenAI announced OpenAI 5.0. It's like, instead of 4.5, 5.0. And, Ralph, I watched a gentleman, it was a streamer, but he is not the most eloquent spoken, not the most he's pretty technical, but he's not very tech savvy. I watched this gentleman play a game that he coded from scratch using ChatGPT 5.0. Like, he had absolutely zero game coding experience, zero coding experience, and he created assets, pictures, sound clips. The game, he just typed into ChatGPT and said, add a pause screen, add a button for this, add a counter for how many, and he made like a Doom-like game, where you're kind of going around like the walls and you shoot little sprites. He essentially made Doom in about 2 hours, and all he had to do was just say, add this, add that, do this, and it was a fully functioning running game. And
good Lord.
When you said advances in AI, it's technology has this compounding effect where even what we've already seen from AI has been transformative in so many fields, and AI itself is getting, just transformed every couple of months, and it's very exciting. You chose a good specialty niche to kind of get into, because it's advancing so rapidly.
Yes, it certainly is. And you can't avoid artificial intelligence for all of its scary aspects, but all of its wonderful aspects. It's here to stay, folks. And like Ben said, it's like a fusion reactor. It's just feeding on itself and expanding every single minute of every day. That's a great story. I'd love to see that video.
Yeah.
But yeah, go
I
ahead.
say we start with, go ahead, and I say we, with that long interlude, let's go ahead and just start with story number one. I'm sure AI is going to pop up somewhere in these stories, maybe even the first story. Who knows?
Who knows?
Let's go ahead and jump into story number one.
Yeah, Ben, maybe we're AI generated and we're not really humans. But anyway, that's okay. This first story comes from TechCrunch.com. Headline: Meta researchers are developing a gesture-controlled wristband that can interact with a computer. So, Ben, we've been seeing over the past many years all kinds of technologies to try to create a new and different ways for human beings to interact with computers. And this is a great example. So let's get into this story. Meta, or actually Meta Reality Labs, researchers are developing a wristband that lets people control a computer using hand gestures. This includes moving a cursor, opening applications, and sending messages by writing in the air as if you're using a pencil. Wow. And I'm going to stop for a second here. One of the things I think that's so intriguing about this is a lot of times interface technologies are bulky and heavy and so forth. This is just a wristband. Very, very clever. Mm-hmm. So Meta's wristband employs a technique called electromyography, which detects electrical signals generated by muscle activity to interpret user movements. And here's the part this really mind-blowing. These signals can sense a person's intended actions even before they do them. Wow. Let that sink in.
and that's so interesting, because I guess when it comes to computers, we're always told, Ralph, that even when you get into programming, like the first thing they tell you is like a computer will only do what you tell it. And if this is true, and this is gesture control and whatnot, that's going to be a very alien, spooky kind of way to interface with a computer, I bet.
It could be. And typical for the show notes, by the way, we highlight 4 articles. I put together the show notes, which are kind of condensed, skipping the stone over the surface of the water of the stories. There's so much depth in them, more than we're going to give you. But I inject tutorial inserts where there's things that the author of the article just assumes you understand and know. And for example, the electromyography signals, I have a side note in the show notes that gives you all kinds of information, much more detail about what that technology is all about. We're not going to spend time on the show now to go through that, but come on to computeramerica.com, get the show notes, as Ben was saying, and you can dive into this if you wish to and learn more about what that is. But getting back to the highlights of the story, the goal of this wristband is to provide less invasive tools to interact with computers for people with motor disabilities. So less invasive is the point we were making a moment ago. Not bulky, not heavy, don't have to wire up your head or anything like this. It's just a wristband. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And really the other option that this one coming from Meta, which of course, Facebook, the other one being Elon Musk's and his Neuralink,
right?
Where they have to, drill into your skull. So I can imagine people would like a less invasive. So
that's a good point that's going to be made in just a moment here too, as well. So the company is collaborating with Carnegie Mellon to test the wristband with people who have spinal cord injuries, enabling them to use computers even if they're unable to fully use their arms or hands. That's pretty interesting too. And to your point just a second ago, the wristband is a simpler alternative to other projects such as Elon Musk's Neuralink, which aims to implant brain chips in individuals with severe paralysis. It's a great effort, but this is another alternative that is much, much less invasive. Other non-invasive approaches include headsets that utilize electroencephalogram, EEG signals. However, these have limitations due to the weak signals they produce. And to wrap this one up, meanwhile, Meta's wristband could be used immediately. Let that that's important, can be used immediately without surgical intervention, and its use of surface electromyography signals means it operates at a higher frequency than the electroencephalogram technology. So pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't imagine that these are going to be operating like Ralph. I imagine that if they can work in tandem, then they probably will work in tandem.
Yeah.
If someone can use one, they'll maybe opt to use the other. Both technologies are worth pursuing, and it's very cool to see that Meta. Even though I think they've had a really hard time just in the news, Ralph. Just they're so dominated by Facebook. They are
Yeah.
Facebook. They are that social media site. They
Right.
have so many scandals when it comes to data leaks and whatnot.
Yeah.
They have a hard time breaking into headlines saying, "Hey, we're a technology company." And I think this is a great story to highlight that they are trying to do efforts to be a hardware company just as much as any of the other Google or whatever the heck Elon Musk is calling his companies now. They're trying, and this is a noble goal, so I like it a lot.
Yeah, it is a good one. And you made a good point that I want to pick up on and amplify. And that is the possibility that this technology, this wristband technology, it doesn't mean to say necessarily that that's the answer to life for all these people with paralysis and so forth. Hey, it could be part of a combination of solutions. Maybe it's Neuralink combined with the wristband that could give these people amazing capabilities. So there's something to think about as well.
Absolutely. And we've even seen some of this technology make its way to, the general consumer base. Hey, maybe this is just the better way to browse Netflix, where you just wear your remote instead of actually, holding a remote.
Yes.
Little stuff like that. Who knows? That's part of the fun of our shows here, Ralph, is that we get to say, hey, what can this also be used for? And
That's right.
That's a big part of it. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out more, Computer America show notes, and you can see the research paper in Nature, because of course the article had a lot of good information, but of course the research paper is going to have even more information. So check that out. Story number one, story number two, Ralph. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about tires. And tires are a hot button issue. I think I've said before that my go-to news application has turned into BBC. I don't know why. I've picked up a lot of British lingo in my time. Like just the other day, Ralph, I said, I told my wife, when we go on holiday, and I was like, I didn't used to say holiday. I used to say vacation, like an American, but now holiday is starting to bleed in, little stuff like that. Anyways, BBC has a lot of reporting on tires. Tires are a big problem, not just for end of life, but beginning of life. And story number two might be, very relevant to this whole conversation. So, story number two.
Yeah, exactly. And what Ben and I, over the many years here, one of our favorite topics is creating products from recycled materials. And this story is really, I think, pretty important. Comes from the Pirelli tire company and a news release of theirs. And the headline for the announcement is First Standard Production Tire with over 70% bio-based and recycled materials. Wow, that's pretty great. So let's get into this. I think everybody can relate to tires pretty much. That impacts almost everybody's life. So tire maker Pirelli has launched the first standard production tire for the global market, made with over 70% bio-based and recycled materials, including Forest Stewardship Council certified natural rubber. And this certification attests to the responsible management of the natural rubber supply chain from plantation to factory. But the natural rubber is just a fairly small part of this equation for this new tire. Developed in a specific version for the Jaguar Land Rover, talk about British Jaguar Land Rover, the new tire is called Pirelli P as in Paul Zero, Pirelli P0, and will initially be available on selected 22-inch wheel options for the Range Rover. And materials innovation, there's a lot of materials innovations. This is very geeky. We're just going to skip over this and give you just the highlights. But the first element in this mix, this recipe for this new tire, recycled steel, partially sourced from melting of scrap metal instead of virgin raw materials while maintaining the mechanical properties of virgin steel. So recycled metal, but still maintains the properties as if you started with virgin steel. The next one is fascinating, I think. Rice husk derived silica. What? Obtained from rice processing waste used in thread compounds to ensure high performance in wet conditions. Rice husk derived silica. I never even thought about the
Yeah,
husks of the rice.
yeah, it really goes to show, just how many different sources of waste that they're looking at. It's not just, your typical plant, but rice husk. That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, you got to figure with the enormous amount of rice processing worldwide, if there's this husk that's just usually tossed away, but can be used for this, how great is that? I love that. The next one is very geeky and weird. It's called circular carbon black, produced through pyrolysis oil obtained from end-of-life tires. And there's an explanation, an insert in the show notes to explain what pyrolysis oil is. And you can check that out if you're so interested in that. But again, the key is from end-of-life tires. That's where you can get some benefit out of these used tires that you see at your tire repair store piled up in the back. Right. And where do those go? A lot of times the landfill, which is very sad. And then the next part of the ingredient is biocircular polymers, again, pretty geeky here, manufactured from monomers derived from used cooking oil, or again, pyrolysis oil, replacing fossil-based polymers. And remember, a monomer is a small molecule that can chemically bond with other identical or different monomers to form a polymer, which is a large chain-like molecule. Very geeky, folks. But anyway, another example of recycling. I like the cooking oil thing. And then the next and last ingredient in this recipe that's so clever, bioresins, plant-based plasticizers that help optimize the balance between dry and wet performance. Little side note, plasticizers are chemical additives used to make materials, especially plastics, more flexible, softer, and easier to process. So salute to Pirelli for putting this together. More than 70% recycled materials in this new tire they've created. Good for them.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem that needs to be solved because of all the talk of high technology that we do on the show here, Ralph. One technology that never really seems to go away are things like tires and shoes and whatnot. Like, even when we come to self-driving cars and how they were talking about removing, engines and oil and gas and drivers and all this stuff, tires, I think, are going to be a consistent in our lives for a long time. So learning to make them sustainably and, in a, more eco-friendly way, definitely important. So hopefully this spreads beyond just the Jaguar Land Rover lineup. And hey, I would love to see more of these recycled tires, out there and available. So there you go. Yep. So story number 2, story number 3. And this one is, Ralph brings us such great uplifting stories that sometimes a couple sneak in there that are like, yeah, we could put a robot dog in a war zone with a gun strapped on its back. That could be cool. Sometimes some of these stories border on the creepy, but hey, that's just technology in a nutshell. What is cool could also be, what is scary. So let's go ahead and talk about story number 3. And this one is, it straddles that line, but at the same time, when it comes to, I remember doing a story about this, Ralph, a couple of years ago, and it had to do with the same technology, just minus AI, because AI wasn't a thing at that point, and they could do this. And from the get-go, before we even get into it, I will just say, for home automation, it was supposed to kind of trailblaze it because, you would, before you walk into a room, the lights would come on. Before you walk into the kitchen, things would start to boot up. Before you go to your garage, the garage door would open, stuff like that.
Right.
Totally possible, but of course, story number 3, AI takes it to a whole different level. So let's talk about this.
Yeah. This is a fun story. And it could be creepy and a little bit weird, but also could be very positive if it's used in a responsible way. So with that said, this story comes from an outlet called gadgets360.com. That's a fun outlet, by the way. Headline, Who-Fi, not Wi-Fi, Who, WHO-Fi, an AI-powered Wi-Fi technology that can identify and track individuals without cameras. So, of course, the surveillance and that sort of world would be interested in this. Now, in another article in techexplore.com on the same topic, the headline there I thought was very useful. Who-Fi, new surveillance technology can track people by how they disrupt Wi-Fi signals. Very, very interesting. And in the show notes, there's a great illustration from their research paper that further explains this a little bit here. But let's get into this. Who-Fi is a cutting-edge technology developed by researchers from La Sapienza University of Rome, I hope I pronounced that correctly, that leverages artificial intelligence to identify and track individuals without needing any visual input. It's an experimental technology which remains to be thoroughly tested in the real world, but researchers claim it could be used to turn any ordinary Wi-Fi signal into a biometric scanner that can not only track the movement and active position of an individual, but also identify their unique biometric signature. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure that we will here in a second. But you could see where I was kind of going with the creepy part. But no, there are a lot of positive possibilities from this too.
Right. Exactly. For example, monitoring, say, an Alzheimer's patient, being able to monitor their movements and so forth and so on, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like a fall detection, just like you said,
yes.
Very important.
Yeah, that's a great example. So let's understand how this technology works. So according to the team's research paper, which we have a link in the show notes to, regular 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi signals, boy, that's, very regular, can be used to identify and track individuals and play an important role in both identity authentication and surveillance. The technology also, of course, raises fresh concerns about digital privacy and security. So sure, we realize that. But breaking the technology down, the Who-Fi system uses a combination of a Wi-Fi signal and a transformer-based neural network, also known as a large language model. There's your AI. And a transformer-based neural network is a type of deep learning architecture designed to handle sequential data. For example, like language, audio, or time series with remarkable efficiency and flexibility. So it's Wi-Fi plus this transformer-based neural network AI technology coming together to make this possible. In the show notes, I have a little bit more about large language model and so forth, and you can read that if you wish. So whenever a human is near a Wi-Fi signal in this system, the distortion in the signal's natural path creates a unique pattern. So the distortion in the signal's natural path creates a unique pattern. This pattern is said to be as accurate as other biometric signatures of humans, such as fingerprints, facial patterns, and the structure of the retina. That part, stop. I have a little hard time believing this is going to be as accurate as that, but that's what the researchers are claiming.
Yeah, I'm thinking, maybe if the sensors were let's face it, in our home, even in my home where I'm pretty tech savvy and I am not afraid to call tech support when I need to. I can barely get the laptop to work in the family room, when I want it to, because of the Wi-Fi. I think in perfect laboratory settings, because at the outset of this article, they said, it needs real world testing.
Yes,
in
it
perfect
does.
Laboratory setting, Ralph, quite possibly maybe. But that is so far from the real world that I also share your skepticism on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I applaud the idea of saying, what if we did this? And it's always fascinating to wonder, how do they even come up with this idea to begin with. But with that said, it's interesting. It's something to think about. And maybe in certain very controlled environments, this might work and work well in the real world. So the HUFI system can recognize this signature and attribute it to individuals. And then once it has been trained on these signatures, meaning the unique patterns of, say, my face and body and so forth, the system can not only track the individual's movement, but also identify them even when they re-enter the network zone after a prolonged period. It can also capture body movement data and even recognize sign language. That's kind of cool. And to wrap it up here, the main advantage of the system is that it functions without any visual or auditory sensors, such as cameras and microphones. So I don't know. This is extremely twinkle of the eye, early research, which the researchers admit needs a tremendous amount of real world application to prove its possibilities. But with that said, a pretty cool thing. And at least you can impress your friends with saying, have you heard about HUFI?
Absolutely. No, and of course, if you want to find out more, like this one, with Ralph and I being so like, how does that actually work? The authors the authors of the research paper were very tricky. They hid it behind math, and you can see it up there on the video portion. So if they didn't hide it behind math, then we could figure out how they did this. And you can see all the equations up there and what they did. And here, Ralph, they kind of mentioned multiple antennas and all this kind of thing. I'm thinking they kind of set up a room with, many antenna, many different access points and, places to kind of pick this up. And that's where they can get the sign language. That's where they can get the fully identified thing. It's not going to be, one router in the back room of your house, being able to feed it all the way. No, you're going to need a few more access points than that to be able to get these benefits. But exactly. Ralph, I don't see Wi-Fi really going anywhere in the future. And if anything, it's just going to be built more and more into homes and different facilities. So this is definitely a technology that in the future can definitely get better and better. And of course, with AI itself getting better. I remember this, Ralph, I want to say back in 2018, same technology minus the AI. And again, what they were doing was not sign language level detection, but at least room level. They could say, okay, there's a person in this room. So the home can then turn on lights, do this, do that. Maybe if you have like a split unit, do the AC, air control, things to make your home more efficient. And I think a use case like that is still totally possible to be able to detect movement through a home. And Ralph, one last application, I was thinking maybe home security. It's like, okay, here's a person, here are the normal 4 people in the home. That's all good. Someone new and the alarm is set. Hey, maybe, just existing in that space would be detected. And that is important as well. So
that's a good idea.
Yep. So there you go. Story number 3. And once again, possibilities always the fun part. The what ifs. So there you go. Story number 3. Story number 4, Ralph. Let's go ahead and head into story number 4. And for the new people out there, story number 4 is generally, it could be different than the other 3 stories, although the first 3 could be medical related. But story number 4 usually follows a theme, and it's always a great one to end a Friday on. So yeah, Ralph.
Yeah, so what Ben's referring to is that we like to end the show most of the time with something from medical science, technology, and research. This certainly fits the bill well. And this also fits something that Ben and I have been tracking now for multiple years, and that's the increasing advancements and interest in stem cell-based organoids. And we'll explain that if you're not familiar with that term in medical research. So this comes from medicalexpress.com, one of my hands-down favorite sites for the world of medical technology advancements. Headline: scientists create first mini lungs with built-in blood vessels. That's the key. Unlocking new insights for pulmonary vascular disease. Wow, medicalexpress.com. Great story here. So here, let's get into this. UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, of course, researchers in collaboration with Cincinnati Children's Hospital, I love this collaboration, have created the first stem cell-based miniature lungs with fully integrated blood vessel networks, marking a significant leap in biomedical research. And let's start going through some of the key highlights. Once again, this is we're just giving you the bare bones highlights. There's so much more in the story you can get from the links and so forth that are in the show notes. But one of the things that's key here is integrated vascularization. Previous lung organoid models lacked blood vessels. This new method allows lung tissue and blood vessels to co-develop from the same stem cell material, improving realism and functionality of the resultant lung organoid. Now, they had an unexpected discovery in this process. Initial attempts to grow vascular and lung cells separately revealed both were, surprise, forming together, leading researchers to adopt a more natural development approach. So they just kind of stumbled on this. This was an unexpected discovery. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ben, go ahead if you have a comment.
I was just thinking, I guess in a clinical setting, I'm thinking, okay, they have a very precise thing that they're trying to coax and, and create these lungs. And then I don't know what it means. And this is, again, where the show notes come in handy and, you can dig in and find more. But develop a more natural developmental approach. And I'm like, oh, they just started growing a human and then they just harvested the lungs. No, probably not that. But, what does a more natural development approach mean? But very cool, though.
Yeah, if I understand it right, it was they were developing the tissue and the blood vessel things separately, and then they realized the stem cells were doing it holistically, which was, of course, a more natural, like your body would develop as a fetus or something. So it's very cool, very geeky. So some of the enhanced model benefits from what they've discovered is greater cell diversity and structure, better cell survival, a closer resemblance to early stage human lung development. That was my reference to fetus, for example. And there's a disease modeling and applications for this new advancement, enabled modeling of both vascular and epithelial defects, something prior organoids couldn't replicate. And epithelial defects refers to damage or loss in the thin layer of cells called epithelial tissue that lines and protects surfaces throughout the body. And potential for studying various pulmonary vascular diseases and drug testing without animal models. And they have some next steps to wrap this one up. Introduce mechanical stretching and air exposure to simulate breathing and mature lung architecture. So they want to get these organized to breathe. Okay. And scale production for drug development and broader research. Very interesting stuff in the world of organoids based on stem cells.
Yeah, at the very least, that last point and the last point from the previous section that you have there in the show notes, just being able to create real working living tissue and without animals, without donors or anything like that, and being able to study, test drugs. Like, you could just imagine, Ralph, that how strict medicine research is, how strict medical research is, and if you could just have 100 different samples of lung tissue that you just grew and you can just start testing right away. Think of how fast, new drugs, new research, new treatments, new therapies can come to market and start helping people that much faster. It's an exciting time for medical research because we're getting to the point where, you need a heart to test on. You don't have to wait for a donor or, fish from a very limited supply or look for people who are willing to do something very, very risky. No, you can just grow heart tissue and start going at it. So, It's very, very important research. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're following along with the show notes, you can see there we just wrapped up story number 4, which again, computeramerica.com. But at the end, you may say, but Ben, there's these honorable mentions. What the heck are these things? These are stories that are just as good, just as important. If you find yourself in the honorable mentions, don't worry, you're doing good work. It's just Ralph keeps this to a more condensed window, so we have a shorter listening time. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out more, there's more good news. We don't just have, only 4 good stories. And Ralph, we can at least give them the headlines, the sources, and then come out to Computer America, find the show notes, and pick up more on it if they like to hear more about these stories. But they're all good. They're all cool. Just don't have time for them. So let's at least do the headlines.
Yeah, exactly. And we have 4 honorable mentions. And the first story fits into the category of something that Ben and I just love. And that's taking stuff that would normally just be waste and finding clever ways to repurpose that, recycle it in a way to create another product that we need. So the headline here is scientists develop game-changing method to make use of walnut and pistachio shells to make biomass fuel. This comes from the Cool Down via MSN. That's a fun story. Check that one out. I love it in terms of recycling. It's just so cool. Well, not so much recycling, but repurposing that which otherwise would just be waste. And the next one comes from timesofinnovation.com, headline, World's Most Advanced Haptic Gloves Bring Real-Time Touch into Virtual Reality. Oh, there's so much going on in that world. It's a great story, and it's a very cool looking glove, by the way. Check that out. That's fun. The next one is
Well, and as I say, just there's something about AI and hands that they get it right most of the time. The gloves are definitely concept, but I'm sure that the finished product, Ralph, will probably have all 5 fingers on the right hand. So instead of just 4 fingers on the right hand. So.
Oh, yeah, good one. And the next one comes from interestingengineering.com, one of my main go-to sources for a lot of stories, by the way. Headline, U.S. firm to build 3,275 degrees Fahrenheit brick battery to decarbonize steel and cement plants. First of all, that caught my eye because what the heck's a brick battery? Well, you can find out about that through the show notes. Come out and check it out. Very, very interesting. And our last one, honorable mentions, is again from medicalexpress.com. Headline, Smarter Flow Simulation Model for Analyzing Blood Flow in Brain Aneurysms Improves Efficiency and Accuracy. Another uplifting, positive example of medical science technology building us a better world if we keep funding this research, folks.
Yeah. Yep, always important. And, a lot of research is still going on out there. And Ralph, I think we're seeing more and more collaboration as you highlight every single time that you come on here. That actually, there's music. So every time that you come on, we are seeing more collaborations from, universities across the world, across the country, different fields, different disciplines. Ladies and gentlemen, there's so much good research out there, and so many people working to make everything work better. And it's never a bad thing to really remember that it's all going to be okay. And hopefully technology is a force for good and not just the scary in our lives. So with that being said, Ralph, really an amazing set of stories. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out more about these, one last time, computeramerica.com. In the show notes, we have a section at the top for Ralph Bond. All of his past, previous shows, and current shows, you can find them right there at the top. So with that being said, Ralph, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone out there, thank you for tuning in. We will catch you here next time. And until then, I want to thank you so much. Do something fun. Have a good weekend, and we'll be there next Friday. Everyone, have a good one. Bye-bye.